So for today's video, we are taking a look at the monthly reward card for December 2017, and it's finally been revealed. You can see it in game. If you'll excuse my dumpster rank right now for Legend, I apologize for that being so low, but I've not played a ton this month. In fact, I've only played 86 games total, so yeah, sorry about the embarrassing Legend rank, but Black Hand Messenger, you can see it if I mouse over, or ta-da, we click on it, right? Black Hand Messenger. This is a 3-cost assassin card. They went a little bit out of order. They had been doing a single attribute and then a class card, a single attribute, and a class card. We were due for willpower this month, and somebody had even done some like in-game data mining and found that this art had already existed. This was marked as number 21. And there was a card that was marked at number 20 that had art of a wolf. I assume that whatever the willpower card is going to be wolf themed. But for some reason, don't know why, we got this one instead. So it's a little bit out of order. But it's a 3-cost assassin card, 0/2 body, dark elf. But it has drain, and it has a summon ability of deal 2 damage to a creature. Last gasp, deal 2 damage to your opponent. Now, the important things to note about this card. First, because it has drain, it will gain life whenever it deals damage on your turn. So, when you play the summon ability, right, if it's on your turn, it does 2 and you gain 2. Similarly, if the last gasp triggers on your turn, when it does 2 to your opponent, you will also gain 2. However, if it's not your turn and your opponent attacks into this card, they still take 2 damage when this dies, but you don't gain the health. Also similarly, if your opponent uses like a Wabbajack on one of your creatures and it turns into this, you'll get to deal the 2 damage, but if it's their turn, right, because if this was summoned through like Wabbajack or whatever, if it's their turn, you don't gain the health, because again, drain only triggers on your turn. Same thing with like Balmora Spymaster, for example. You know, if you have a Balmora Spymaster on the board and somebody attacks into it on their turn and you end up getting this card, you'll still deal the 2 damage, but you will not gain the health. So just remember that about drain. Now, let's talk about Balmora Spymaster and the obvious thing that people are going to jump to with this card. This card has Last Gasp. This card is an assassin card. You are likely thinking, hey, I should probably play this in Last Gasp Assassin. You could do that. I'm not saying that's a bad choice, but I'm also not saying it's a great choice. I actually think this card is very, very, very good, but is very good in slower assassin decks that want to stall the early game, because that's where this card shines. This card is fantastic at stalling out the early game. Cards that this works really well with would be items, or Dark Rebirth. Dark Rebirth is great because it's going to basically allow you to do 2 damage to a creature again, also trigger the Last Gasp. Because you played Dark Rebirth, it's likely your turn, so you get to nuke something for 2, deal 2 damage to your opponent, and gain 4 health. It's a decent amount of burst healing, especially in a class like Assassin that traditionally in the past just didn't really have it. The only actual like burst healing that you had was like House Kinsman, but you had to trigger the Last Gasp, Thievery, which was basically unplayed, and Ransack, that was very, very, very underrepresented, right? It's cost prohibitive. It was played a bit in like Prophecy Assassin way, way back in the day, like a year ago. I've seen a couple of Control like monks run it because of a lack of like alternatives, but for the most part, Ransack wasn't played either. So like the assassin class just didn't really have burst healing. You relied heavily on drain if you needed to stabilize. Moonlight Werebat, Queen Baronzia, these were your go-to cards for stabilizing. This card gives you burst healing. You play it from hand, you get a nice 2. If you play it with Dark Rebirth, you can get a nice 4. You throw items on it, then yeah, it's still drained, but it's after you've already got at least that initial 2. The reason I think this card is very, very good, especially in something like Item Assassin, and when I say Item Assassin, in my mind I'm imagining this being a combo-oriented item assassin, not your mid-rangey version. In the combo-oriented one, where you're hoping to get a couple of really like beefy items to throw on a charge creature like a Cliff Racer or a giant bat if you run it or things like that. This card is great because again it stalls the early game. So when you play this on 3, right, you're pulling something off the board, you're gaining health, but you're also saying to your opponent, like, I dare you to leave it on the board. And that's the real like part to this that I think stands out. Your opponent has to make a decision once you've played this card on whether or not they can afford to ignore the O2 body. Now, they may decide, hey, like, I don't want him to throw, a Mace of Encumbrance on this. I don't want him to put Tome of Alteration that he got from Daggerfall on this later and start gaining more health. So they attack into it. Now, okay, so they attack into it, they take 2, because they attacked into it, you don't get the drain, this was an expensive firebolt that gained you 2 health. Well, yes and no, because whatever they attacked into it with, which is a minimum of at least something for 2 power, means that you got like pseudo healing, right? That was an attack that could have went to your face, but didn't because they opted to get rid of this. So, really, like, worst case scenario, this is still always going to be like do 2 heal 4, or like do 2 eat a silence, or it's going to always have that like fringe benefit that isn't immediately available on the card, but it will impact games. Specifically, again, if you're playing this in a combo deck or a control deck, more often than not, like, you don't care that it's an O2 body because you weren't going to attack with it anyway. At least not right away. You certainly didn't want to start giving your opponent runes. In fact, that's why I think that the Last Gasp might hang some people up. I think the Last Gasp is potentially a drawback to this card. I would almost rather have this not have a Last Gasp that dealt 2 damage to my opponent because I don't want to give them runes by accident. So I love this card for Control Assassin. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Control Assassin doesn't exist. And to that I would largely agree, but not because it can't. Twice I've taken Control Assassin to Legend. In fact, when Heroes of Skyrim came out, like 80% of my games to Legend in July that month was on Control Assassin. I was playing some weird, like, dragon-oriented, shout-oriented Control Assassin. Nothing's really, like, changed in that build, so it's entirely still something that could sneak around. That deck in particular is very, very good at handling tokens. And even more so now. So with the release of Return to Clockwork City and this card, Control Assassin could be your go-to deck for dealing with tokens if you're seeing a lot of tokens on the ladder, because you can still run the Shout package, right? But you get Dragon Aspect and Drain Vitality as your Shout package, but it turns out Drain Vitality is just really good. On top of it, you still can also run Ice Storm and run Reverberating Strike. So you have massive amounts of potential for dealing damage and clearing out tokens or like go wide strategies. The other nice thing about Control Assassin is you get a fair amount of burst. In fact, when I was playing, that was how I was winning most of my games. You don't necessarily need a traditional finisher because you get access to things like Lightning Bolt, Cliff Racer. You can run Crushing Blow if you want. You have Tazcad, you have Encano. Back when I was running it in July, I was running 2 copies of Dark Rebirth. Dark Rebirth is, again, very good with Encano. It's very good with Tazcad. You're a control deck that just has a lot of burst potential. So you stall, and then once you've taken control of the board, you basically set up like 2 turn lethals, right? Or you get one big chunk of damage out, followed by another one. Assassin, from a control standpoint, at least when I was playing it, also never had problems with drawing cards. There might not be a control archetype that draws cards better than Assassin, because you get access to things like Thieves Guild Recruit and Eclipse Baroness. And it turns out Eclipse Baroness with Dark Rebirth is actually quite hilarious if you just need to stick a bunch of cards in your hand. So, I like the archetype. It does, at least in the past, it had struggled against Scout, and naturally, because Scout is designed to prey on control decks. But I legitimately wasn't having a hard matchup against anything else. And with Scout becoming a little less popular now, I could see Control Assassin performing well again. That being said, all right. So just because I've played Control Assassin, doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily just turn up and be a thing. I don't expect it to be a popular archetype. Of the assassin decks that would play Blackhand Messenger, I think that Item Assassin will be the more popular. I also am not 100% certain that this will be a popular play. That does not, however, in my opinion, make me think that the card is bad. I think this card is actually very good at what it wants to do. I do, however, think that it will be very underrepresented on the ladder. So I'm certainly going to brew with it. I'm sure I will try both Item Assassin and Control Assassin in the month of January. But as good as I think this card is, and I really do think it's good, it's very, very good at stalling the game, and it gives Assassin that burst healing that it just did not have before. Because most people like to play mid-range Assassin / like Tempo Assassin, there's also been like Goblin Assassin floating around. Those decks do not want to play this card, and as such, I just don't think you're going to see a lot of this on the ladder. Don't let that fool you. It does not mean that the card is bad. I just don't think that this will be a thing you'll see a bunch of because of popularity, right? Remember, popularity does not mean power level and vice versa. So this card, I'm a fan of it. I can't wait to play it. I know I'm personally excited. Again, for Control Assassin, which is not as bad as everyone thinks it is, I think it's very, very good. For Item Assassin, it can certainly help you stall the early game while you try to find your combo pieces to set up those, big charging items, right? Yeah, I think that's where it sits. I'd like to know what you guys think, like always, so, tell me I'm wrong. I'm sure I'll get a lot of that. Here's the other thing. Ulfric's Housecarl came out, and I was like, don't sleep on this. There was a lot of naysayers. Worm King's Agent came out, and I was like, I think it's like not as bad, but I wasn't as bullish on it as I probably could have been or should have been. Going forward, I think I'm not going to play it safe. I do think this card is good. I will demonstrate that it is good. I look forward to doing it. I don't think it will be popular, but I do think it's good. So let me know what you think. Let me know why you think it's trash. Let me know how you plan on using it. As always, I love you guys, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.